Ellie's fingers crushed Luke's denim vest as she breathed. He's after me. Luke had been reaching for his coffee when the girl collided with him hard enough to slosh black liquid across the gas station counter. She couldn't have been older than 8. One pink sneaker was untied. A cartoon bandage clung crookedly to her knee. Her chest heaved like she had run until her lungs burned raw, but it was her eyes that stopped him cold. Wide, fixed, hunted. She wasn't crying the way lost kids cried. She was listening. Luke lowered himself just enough to bring his face level with hers. His size usually scared children on first sight. 6'4", scarred down one cheek, leather cut stretched across a frame built by years of hauling engines and taking hits. But the second he saw the way she kept checking the glass doors behind her, his voice changed. Who? He asked. Ellie shook her head so fast her ponytail whipped across her face. If he sees me talking, he'll take me back. That landed heavier than fear. It carried memory, not of a stranger in a parking lot, but of someone who had already laid claim to her. The cashier, a tired woman in her 50s with reading glasses hanging from a chain, looked over from the register and frowned. Sweetheart, where's your mama? Ellie's mouth trembled. She told me to run. Luke's hand flattened against the counter. That single sentence changed the room. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a child wandering off while a parent pumped gas. Somewhere close by, a grown woman had sent her little girl away in panic and stayed behind. Luke turned toward the front windows. Outside, the truck islands shimmered in the afternoon heat. A family loaded coolers into a minivan. A delivery driver smoked beside an ice machine. 2 of Luke's club brothers stood near their bikes, laughing over something under an open saddlebag. Ordinary. Too ordinary. The kind of ordinary that made real danger easier to miss. Then he saw him. A man in a gray ball cap moved between the pumps without buying gas, his eyes sliding from car to car with ugly purpose. Mid-30s, clean jeans, work boots, jaw clenched hard enough to show through his beard. He wasn't frantic. He wasn't calling a child's name. He was searching like a man trying to recover property before anyone noticed it was gone. Luke felt Ellie press closer behind his arm. That him? He asked without looking down. Her fingers dug in deeper. That was answer enough. The cashier straightened. Should I call the police? Yes, Luke said. But Ellie grabbed his vest again and shook her head with sudden terror. No. He'll hear. He always hears. The man outside stopped near the windshield wash station and looked directly toward the store. Luke's body moved before thought finished catching up. He stepped sideways, blocking Ellie from the glass with his full frame. Not a warning. Not a debate. A wall. The girl disappeared behind leather and muscle as if she had dropped behind a boulder. The man's stare lingered. Luke held it. For one long second, nothing in the store made a sound except the hum of the coolers and the nervous crackle of the hot dog rollers behind the counter. Then the stranger started walking toward the entrance. The cashier sucked in a breath. One of the old farmers at the coffee station muttered, "That don't look right." No, Luke said. It doesn't. He looked down at Ellie. Listen to me. I'm going outside. You stay behind the counter with her. He nodded at the cashier. Do not let that door open for him if I'm not standing in it. Ellie panicked instantly. Don't leave me. There it was, the boundary he could not cross carelessly. If he stayed inside, the man could walk in and force the whole thing into a tight, terrified room full of civilians. If he stepped out, he risked leaving Ellie feeling abandoned for one fatal second too long. Luke made the choice anyway. He crouched, forcing Ellie to meet his eyes. The little bell over the diner door gave one thin chime as Luke rose from his crouch. Ellie's fingers were still twisted in the sleeve of his denim vest, knuckles white, breath coming too fast for a child trying not to make a sound. The whole room seemed to tighten around that grip. Grease hissed on the flat top behind the counter. Coffee burned in a pot no one had remembered to shut off. Every small noise suddenly felt too loud. Across from her, Luke kept his voice low and steady, the way a man talks to a skittish horse standing near a highway. Look at me, he said. Ellie did, though tears had already brimmed in both eyes. You were right to tell me. That landed deeper than comfort. It was permission, not just to be afraid, but to trust what she knew. A truck roared past outside, headlights dragging across the front windows in a smear of yellow-white light. Ellie flinched hard enough that the salt shaker rattled on the table. Luke didn't touch her again. He understood the line now. If he crowded her, she might feel trapped. If he moved too far away, She might think he had chosen the easier path. So he gave her something harder than a promise. He gave her a job. "If that man comes through the door," he said, "you do not run to me. You go behind the counter and stay down. Make them drag me out before they get near you." The words shocked the waitress nearest them. She froze with a stack of plates in her hands. Ellie stared at him, hurt flashing across her face before she understood what he was really saying. He was not stepping away from her. He was putting himself between her and whatever came next, even if it cost him. That was when the change happened. Not in Luke. In Ellie. Fear had brought her to him, but fear was not going to carry the next move. Her hand slipped from his sleeve. For one terrible second Luke thought she was shutting down. Instead, she reached into the pocket of her oversized hoodie and pulled out a folded piece of receipt paper, worn soft from being clenched too long. "I took this," she whispered. Luke frowned. "From who?" Her eyes flicked to the front windows, then back to him. "From his truck." The receipt was smeared with dirt and one greasy thumbprint, but the top line was still readable. "A gas station off Route 16, less than 20 miles away. Timestamp, 43 minutes earlier." Luke's gaze sharpened. "You took this tonight?" Ellie nodded, swallowing hard. "When he got out to yell at somebody. I thought if I had proof he was real, nobody could say I made him up." That one sentence tore through the last harmless explanation in the room. This was not a child spooked by shadows. This was a child who had been disbelieved enough times that she had started collecting evidence. Luke looked toward the counter. "Phone." The older waitress slid it across without asking questions. But before he could dial, Ellie grabbed his wrist. "No." Her voice cracked, but she didn't let go. "If you call and he hears sirens before they get here, he leaves. Then he comes back later. He always comes back later." Luke studied her face. Children were supposed to ask adults to take over. Ellie was doing the opposite. She was forcing him to understand the shape of the danger instead of charging into it blind. This was her move now. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. The question startled her almost as much as it startled everyone listening. For a beat, the diner held perfectly still. Then Ellie pointed toward the parking lot windows. "Make it look normal. Don't make him think I found somebody." Luke followed her line of sight. Outside, a few bikes sat under the buzzing lot lights, chrome catching pale reflections. Two men from 50 were near the pumps at the station next door, half turned toward the diner, smoking and talking. Grease, coffee, and the burnt sugar smell of pie hung thick in the diner air, while nobody at the counter pretended not to listen. The waitress had stopped wiping the same spot twice. A trucker in a seed cap kept his hand around his mug without lifting it. Near the window, the jukebox glowed blue and red and played low enough to make the silence around Ellie feel louder. Luke did exactly what she had asked. He did not turn fast. He did not square his shoulders. He only reached for the coffee pot on the warmer, as if refilling his cup had suddenly become the most important thing in the world. Ellie stayed close enough that the edge of his vest brushed her forehead when she lowered her face. The move made her look less like a child hiding and more like a tired kid leaning near an adult she knew. That was the illusion, anyway. Outside, the lot lights buzzed over the blacktop. The two men from 50 were still by the pumps next door, but one had noticed Luke standing now. The man gave the smallest nod, the kind that could have meant anything to anyone else. At the end of the counter, one of the older riders muttered, "Could be custody. Could be a family fight we don't belong in." Another gave a grim half shrug. Wouldn't be the first time a scared kid bolted from the person supposed to bring her home. The words were low, careful, almost reasonable. That was what made them dangerous. Reason could get a child handed back to the wrong person. Ellie heard every word. Her grip tightened once. Then she forced herself to speak without looking up. "He said people always think that first." Luke set the coffee pot down without pouring. "Who said that?" "The man looking for me." Her voice was thin, but not confused. "He tells everyone I get upset and make stories. He says I have a hard time after my mom passed." She swallowed hard. "He says to smile and stay close because if I cry too much, people ask questions." That shifted something along the counter. Luke angled his body a little more toward her, enough to block the window from her sight. "You know his name?" A tiny pause. Then she nodded. "Does he live with you?" One of the riders asked. "No." Ellie shook her head fast. "Not before. He started coming over all the time. Then after." She stopped and pressed her lips together until the color drained from them. "After the funeral, he had keys." The trucker in the seed cap finally set down his mug. Luke kept his voice even. Did he hurt you? Her answer came too quickly. Not where it shows. Then, as if hearing what she had admitted, she flinched from her own words. Nobody in the diner moved for a full second. Luke crouched slightly, not enough to make a scene, just enough to bring his face lower. Ellie, I need you to tell me one thing that means we do not hand you over by mistake. She looked at him then, and whatever had kept her going by instinct seemed to gather into focus. There's a little yellow room upstairs, she whispered. At the house. Not mine. It used to be for sewing, I think. He put a lock on the outside. Her breath hitched once. He said it was for when I got dramatic. The older rider at the counter went still. Ellie kept going because now she understood doubt was losing ground. He keeps the key on the ring with the red gas station tag. He takes his watch off before he comes in there because the metal scratched me one time and he got mad about it. Her voice was shaking harder now, but the details came clean and sharp. And there's a crack in the ceiling shaped like a river. I counted it when I had to stay quiet. No one said custody after that. The diner seemed to tighten around the booth after that, as if the whole room had leaned 1 inch closer without anybody scraping a chair. Coffee steamed in thick white ribbons beneath the hanging lights. A truck idled outside. Somewhere in the kitchen, a spatula hit the flat top with a sharp metal clap, and even that sounded too loud. No one argued with what Ellie had just said. Luke did not rush to fill the silence. That was the first thing that made it feel different. He let her words settle where everybody could hear them and understand them for what they were. Not panic, not confusion, not a child inventing a monster, but memory. Hard, ugly memory with details no one could fake. At the counter, one of the older men slowly set down his fork. The waitress stopped pretending to polish a coffee cup and finally just held it in both hands. Near the window, the 2 men from 50 by the pumps turned fully now, cigarettes forgotten between their fingers as they looked in. Luke reached into his vest, drew out his phone, and laid it flat on the table before touching it. He kept his voice low enough not to crowd Ellie, but steady enough that the room understood this was no longer a conversation drifting on sympathy. This was a line being drawn. We need eyes, he said. He sent out 3 short messages. No drama, no speech, just directions, the diner's location, and 1 instruction repeated twice, quiet approach. Then he looked beyond the glass front of the diner, studying the station next door, the frontage road, the lot, the dark stretch past the ice machine, the narrow side lane running between the building and the dumpster enclosure. His gaze measured distances the way some men measured boards before making a cut. Who could see the door? Who could reach the rear exit? Where headlights would show too early? Where someone could park and wait unseen? One of the men from 50 came in without being waved over. He did not ask questions. Luke pointed once toward the back hall that led to the restrooms and kitchen door, then toward the side windows. The man nodded and moved off, stopping by the pie case long enough to look like any hungry traveler deciding on a slice. Another stepped in a minute later and bought a pack of gum from the register he clearly did not want. He lingered near the front as if checking his wallet, then settled by the newspaper rack where he had a clean view of the parking lot and the road. The shift in the room was almost invisible, which was exactly the point. Exits did not close with chains or shouting. They closed with ordinary bodies occupying ordinary places until ordinary was no longer available to the wrong man. Ellie watched all of it with both hands around her water glass. Her knuckles were white, but she was watching, not shrinking. That mattered to Luke more than he showed. You don't have to tell it all at once, he said. Her eyes flicked to the men from 50, then back to him. Are they here for me? They're here because you spoke, and we listened. That answer seemed to land somewhere deeper than reassurance. It did not promise impossible things. It told her the truth. What she said had changed the room. Outside, a pickup rolled through the station lot too slowly, headlights sliding over the diner windows like pale search beams. The driver kept moving, but every spine in the place went a little straighter until the taillights disappeared down the frontage road. Luke waited until the danger passed before asking the next question. The key with the red gas station tag. Where does it go? Ellie swallowed. A room behind the station office. Not the one people see. There's a door past the shelves with motor oil. It sticks at the bottom, so he pulls up before he pushes. Again, the details came clean, small, undeniable. Luke did not interrupt her to soften any of it. The diner's front windows had gone black with night. turning the glass into mirrors that held the room inside it. Chrome stools, a tired pie case, men in denim and leather pretending not to listen too hard. The red gas station tag sat on the table beside Luke's coffee cup like a tiny piece of evidence that had somehow found its own way home. Across from him, Ellie kept both hands wrapped around a mug of hot chocolate she had not touched in 10 minutes. The heat had fogged the rim, but her fingers still looked cold. Nothing in the room moved fast, and that was what made the pressure feel worse. A waitress topped off 2 cups at the counter. Someone fed quarters into the jukebox without choosing a song. Boots crossed the tile near the door, then stopped. 50 had spread out without making a show of it. A man near the register, 2 by the windows, 1 outside at the pumps, another parked where the frontage road bent toward the highway. No one huddled. No one whispered. They had shifted from concern to arrangement, and the difference sat in the air like weather turning. Ellie noticed it too. Are they because of me? Luke looked at the red tag before he answered. They're because grown men lie when they think nobody is ready. That should have comforted her. Instead, her shoulders drew in tighter. If he comes in and acts nice, people believe him. The bell over the diner door gave a light metallic ring. No one in the place jerked around. That was the first thing Luke respected about the men around him. Fear made civilians snap their heads toward danger. Men who had seen trouble before only looked once they were ready to do something about it. A clean-cut man stepped in from the dark as if he belonged to the cold outside and had chosen this room for warmth. Late 30s, pressed jacket, decent boots, the sort of face that could smile at a church picnic and mean nothing by it. He took off a pair of leather gloves finger by finger, calm as a man arriving for dinner. His eyes moved through the room, landed on Ellie, and softened in exactly the way that made Luke's stomach go hard. There you are, the man said. Ellie's mug clicked against the saucer. She had not meant to set it down that hard. The man gave a little laugh for the room's benefit, already performing. You had everybody worried sick. Luke did not rise yet. He stayed seated, one forearm on the table, his body turned enough to block a direct line between the man and the girl. You know her? The man looked at him with polite annoyance. I'm here to take her home. It was a smart answer. Not a name, not a relationship, just a claim wrapped in reason. At the counter, the waitress stopped wiping the same clean spot for the 3rd time. Ellie made no sound, but her chair edged back an inch. The man saw that and corrected his face instantly, adding concern, sanding off the edge. Ellie, sweetheart, you've scared people. Come on now. Luke heard the room absorb the word sweetheart and almost accept it. That was how men like this worked. They did not kick down doors first. They borrowed the language decent people trusted and wore it like a uniform. She doesn't look ready to go anywhere, Luke said. A badge wallet appeared, snapped open so fast, it was almost a magic trick. Something official-looking glinted under the diner lights before folding shut again. Then let's not make this difficult. It was not long enough for anyone across the room to study it. Long enough only to create doubt, and doubt was often all authority needed. The man smiled at the waitress now. Runaway situation. Family matter. Luke did not reach for the wallet or challenge it with his hands. Too early for that, and too easy to lose the room if he came off like muscle fighting law. A spoon hit a saucer somewhere behind the counter. A small clean sound in a room gone tight with caution. The waitress had stopped pretending not to watch. 2 men in work boots near the window held their coffee cups halfway up and never drank. The wallet had already disappeared back inside the man's coat, but its effect stayed behind like smoke. Across from him, Ellie did not look at the badge he had flashed. She looked at the red gas station tag on the table, then at the napkin holder, then at the scarred wood beneath her hands. Every part of her had gone still except her breathing. Luke saw it before anyone else did. Not the fear of a kid caught in a lie, but the numb, practiced stillness of someone who had learned that one wrong word could make a room turn dangerous. The man leaned one forearm on the edge of the booth as if he belonged there. Come on, he said, soft enough to sound reasonable. You've scared everybody enough for one night. The words landed wrong. Ellie's fingers moved before the rest of her did. Slow, shaky, hidden low by the table, she dragged one hand across the vinyl seat beside her and hooked a nail under the edge. Torn there, half concealed in the seam, was a strip of silver duct tape no wider than a finger. She ripped it free and set it on the tabletop next to the red tag. Not much to look at. Dirty on one side. Fibers stuck to the adhesive. But the room changed. Her voice came out thin and scraped raw. That was on the basement chair. For the first time since the man had walked in, Luke did not answer right away. He let the sentence sit where everybody could hear it. The man gave a quick laugh, just enough disbelief to invite the room into it. She's upset. Making things up now. No, Ellie said. The word was small, but it did not shake. The waitress stepped closer before she seemed to realize she was doing it. Basement chair? Ellie swallowed. Color had drained from her face, so completely, she looked lit from underneath by the diner's fluorescence. At home, he said if I kept crying, he'd tape my wrist to the chair so I'd learn to sit still. Her eyes lifted then, not to Luke, but to the waitress. He did it once. Not all night. Just long enough. No one moved. The man straightened an inch. What had looked like confidence a moment ago became calculation. This is getting out of hand. Luke finally spoke, but his voice stayed level. Then it should be easy to clear up. The waitress looked from Ellie to the strip of tape and back again. Something in her face hardened. She reached under the counter, grabbed the old corded phone by the register, and pulled it toward her. I'm calling county dispatch. That was the shift. Not Luke. Not force. Not a threat. The room itself had started choosing sides. The man turned to the counter too quickly. No need for that. I already told you, family matter. The waitress held the receiver in one hand without dialing yet. Kids don't talk about being taped to basement chairs for fun. Ellie's breathing sped up. Once she started, the rest came out like something breaking through a dam she had held shut too long. He's not my dad. She pressed both palms flat on the table as if she needed to pin herself to the booth to keep talking. He moved in after my mom got sick. He said he was helping. Then he started locking doors, taking my phone, saying if I told anybody, they'd put me in foster care and split us up. The man snapped his head toward her. Ellie. It was only her name, but the warning inside it made half the diner hear what he was. Luke heard something else too. Not authority slipping, but control. The kind a man builds in private and loses badly in public. The air in the diner changed all at once, as if somebody had opened an unseen valve and let pressure flood the room. Coffee still steamed in thick, white mugs. Bacon grease still hissed on the griddle behind the counter. But nobody was tasting breakfast anymore. Every face had turned toward the booth where a frightened girl sat tucked against cracked red vinyl, and where one wrong move could turn fear into chaos. The man tried to recover first. He let out a short laugh meant to sound embarrassed, almost paternal, and lifted his empty hands a few inches from his sides. Kids say wild things when they're upset, he said, pitching his voice toward the deputies near the door instead of toward Ellie. She's been through a lot. I'm the one trying to hold this family together. It was a smart move, and Luke knew it. Not because it was convincing, but because it gave hesitant people a place to stand. The nearest deputy shifted his weight, one hand near his belt, eyes moving from the man to Ellie to the ring of leather-clad riders, now filling the aisle and doorway space without touching anyone. Trouble looked obvious. Truth did not. Nobody had drawn a fist. Nobody had broken a chair. Nobody had crossed the line into something simple. That was what made it dangerous. A booth near the window scraped loudly as an older couple stood and moved back. The waitress, pale now, reached under the counter and set the phone beside the register, close enough to grab fast. Outside, engines rolled low in the parking lot, one after another, not revving for show, but arriving with purpose. The diner's front windows flashed with chrome and denim as more members of 50 came in sight. The man saw it too, and for the first time something raw flickered under his practiced calm. This is intimidation, he said, louder now. You're letting a gang interfere with a custody matter. Luke did not answer at once. He stayed where he was, one arm braced along the back of the booth, not touching Ellie, just making it plain where the line was. Then he looked at the deputy instead of at the man. No one here is laying hands on anybody, Luke said. The girl says she's scared to leave with him. That gets heard before anything else. The deputy hesitated. It was not cowardice, just the heavy pause of someone trying to avoid making the wrong kind of headline. Across the room, 3 of 50 had taken positions without being told, spreading out by the front door, the side exit near the restrooms, and the center aisle. Not a wall yet. Not even close. More like a shape forming in Luke's peripheral vision, waiting for a reason to become solid. The man pointed at Ellie as if calling her back to order. Tell them you're upset because your mother's sick. Tell them you don't understand what's happening. Ellie did not shrink this time. Her fingers were trembling around the edge of the table, but her voice came out clear enough for the whole room to hear. My mom didn't tell him to come get me. Silence hit harder than shouting. The deputy nearest the door looked at the second deputy, then pulled a radio from his shoulder. We need confirmation on guardian status, he said. Possible custodial dispute, possible coercion. Juvenile involved. The man took a quick step forward. Not toward Luke. Toward the gap between the table and the aisle. Toward the narrow space where pressure could turn into access if people reacted badly enough. A chair leg barked against tile as one of 50 moved first and blocked the lane. No shove, no threat, just a body placed with absolute certainty. The man stopped short and snapped. Move. That rider did not even look at him. No, the room tightened. Luke saw the next danger before anyone else did. Not a swing, not a weapon. Something meaner and more useful. Confusion. Noise hit first. Not one engine, but many, rolling in from the highway and the side road together until the glass in the diner windows gave a thin, trembling rattle. Every head turned at once. Forks paused halfway to mouths. The waitress looked toward the front before she looked back at Ellie, as if some buried instinct had finally picked a side. The man heard it too. Luke saw the change in him instantly. Not fear exactly. Calculation breaking apart. A second later, chrome flashed across the front windows in hard, broken streaks. Then black bikes filled the parking lot in a wave so sudden it looked less like an arrival than an occupation. Tires crunched over gravel. Engines thundered, then cut one by one, leaving behind a silence that felt even larger because of what had just filled it. 50. Word had traveled faster than panic. Faster than the lies the man had been using all morning. Faster even than the county line. The diner door opened once, then again, then kept opening. Leather, denim, road dust, heavy boots striking old tile with the same unhurried certainty. No one rushed. That was what made it overwhelming. They came in as people who had already decided where they stood. The first riders spread without being told. 2 took the entrance. 3 moved toward the windows. Others stepped into the aisles and along the counter, not crowding the room, not touching anyone, simply changing what the room allowed. Steel keychains glinted. Jackets creaked. Outside, more bikes lined up nose to tail, making a second wall of metal beyond the glass. Ellie looked up from behind the counter, eyes wide but clear now, as if the shape of help had finally become real enough to trust. Luke did not call orders. He did not need to. 50 had ridden with him too long for that. They read the room in pieces and built the answer in place. One rider slid a pie rack aside to close a narrow gap near the kitchen swing door. Another pulled an empty table 3 feet with a scrape that made the man flinch, then angled it so there was no straight lane to the counter. 2 more stepped shoulder to shoulder at the open end of the booths. No threats, no raised fists, just geometry, numbers, and will. The man tried to recover by getting louder. This is insane, he snapped, turning toward the room instead of toward Ellie now. You all seeing this? She belongs with me. She's confused. Nobody moved. That silence hit him harder than shouting would have. He pointed toward Luke, then toward the riders, trying to pull authority back by force of outrage. This is intimidation. You can't box me out like this. Still no one moved. A rider near the door folded his arms. Another took off his gloves finger by finger and tucked them into a back pocket. Outside, more engines sounded in the lot as the last of 50 rolled in and set their kickstands. Through the front glass, the line of bikes looked endless, a dark barricade under the noon light. Luke watched the room, not the man. That was the job now. Not winning. Holding. A deputy's cruiser turned into the lot too fast, tires spitting grit, then braked hard beside the pumps. Relief flickered across the man's face so quickly it almost looked childish. He lifted a hand toward the window. There, he said louder now. Good. Good. We're done playing. The deputy came through the door with one hand near his belt and stopped dead at the sight inside. Riders at every line of approach, the counter sealed behind bodies and steel, Ellie shielded in the center of it all like something carried out of fire and set where no spark could reach. What the hell is this? The deputy demanded. The man answered before anyone else could. They're interfering. She was supposed to come with me. Supposed to. The word landed badly. Luke saw the waitress hear it. Saw a trucker in the back booth lift his head. The trucker in the back booth pushed his plate away and stood up slow. He was a broad man with gray at his temples and a company patch over one pocket. He looked at Ellie, then at the man near the door, then at the deputy, and his face changed the way faces changed when a private thing suddenly became plain in public. "Supposed to," he said. "She ain't a suitcase." The room, which had been holding its breath, let something out. The waitress set down the coffee pot with a hard little click. "She asked for help," she said. "I heard her." Another voice came from the corner booth, an older woman who had barely looked up from her pie until now. "So did I." The deputy's eyes moved across the diner, taking inventory. 50 riders outside. Luke planted near the center lane between the counter and the door. Ellie hidden behind that living ring of denim, leather, and steel. Civilians watching. 2 witnesses speaking up without being asked. Whatever he had thought this was when he came through the door, it was no longer simple. The man tried to recover his footing. "She's confused. I've been looking for her all morning." Ellie did not stay silent this time. She stepped forward from behind the line before Luke could stop her, not enough to expose herself, just enough to be seen. Her hands were shaking, but her voice carried. "No," she said. "You found me last night behind the gas station. You said nobody would believe me if I ran. You said you knew how to wait." She swallowed. "You said I belonged where you put me." The words hit the room like dropped tools on concrete. The deputy turned fully toward the man. "Is that true?" "Of course not." But now the waitress was already moving. Not toward the door, toward the phone mounted beside the register. "Sheriff's office," she said, grabbing the receiver. "And dispatch too. Right now." The man took one step back. That was all it took. 3 things happened at once. The deputy raised a hand. The trucker shifted to block the aisle. And outside, without a shout or a signal anybody in the diner could hear, the line of riders tightened. It was not a charge. It was not a threat. It was a wall deciding to hold. The man looked left, then right, measuring exits and finding bodies at all of them. Through the front windows, he could see motorcycles angled wheel to wheel across the lot, chrome catching the pale light. At the side road, more riders. Near the pumps, more. 50 had turned open space into a boundary he could not talk his way through. His confidence broke in small pieces first. A twitch at the jaw, a glance at the deputy's holster, a wet shine at the temples. Then he made the mistake that ended everything. He lunged, not at Ellie, not at Luke, but at the register counter where the waitress had set down the phone. Fast, desperate, stupid. He slapped for the receiver, maybe to cut the call, maybe to smash it, maybe only because fear had finally outrun reason. He never reached it. The deputy caught one arm. The trucker caught the other. The momentum spun him halfway around and drove him against the pie case hard enough to rattle the glass. A fork slid off a plate and skittered across the floor. The older woman in the booth didn't even flinch. She just folded her napkin and watched him with flat, disgusted eyes. "Easy," the deputy snapped, though he was saying it to the man, not to anyone else. The phone stayed in the waitress's hand. "Yes," she said into it, voice steady now. "We need units here. Child in danger. Witnesses on site." The man started talking fast then, the way men did when the story they had carried in with them no longer fit the room. "She stole from me." Nobody answered. "She's lying." Still nobody. "She's trouble. Ask anybody." Luke saw the exact moment he understood he was alone.